Hello everyone! This brief video will focus on the nutrition topic for Lesson 4 of SUPERKids. We will discuss a very important nutrient in this video, and that is carbohydrates. Today, there are a lot of misconceptions about carbohydrates, which is why we decided to dedicate an entire lesson to the nutrient. And because this topic is complex, we hope that we can simplify it for all of you. The reason why carbohydrates are necessary is because it is our body's main source of energy. Typically, when we talk about carbohydrates, we assume grains, such as rice, bread, tortillas, pasta, but beans, milk, fruits, and vegetables are also carbohydrates. Other forms of carbohydrates include soda and candy, which is where many people may get confused with the nutrient. As you can see on this slide, it may be evident that some of them are healthier than others. So how can it be that all of these foods are considered carbohydrates? Similarly, all of these foods, when broken down in our body, turn into glucose, the simplest form of sugar or carb. Some, however, provide more nutritional benefits than others. So, which ones offer the most nutrients? Well, in addition to supplying glucose, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, and milk provide additional nutrients, such as vitamins and minerals, to help our body function. In other words, these foods are nutrient dense. Sources of carbs that are nutrient poor include refined grains like white bread, candy, sugary snacks, and soda. These foods provide energy or carbs, but do not provide additional benefits. Most importantly, nutrient-dense carbohydrates contain fiber. Fiber is essential. It allows for healthy bowel function, it controls our blood cholesterol, and it's known to decrease the risk of developing diabetes and heart disease. Consuming fiber also helps make you feel fuller longer, which may prevent you from overeating or gaining weight. If you've ever found yourself drinking soda or eating potato chips and never getting full, it's because these foods don't have fiber. Because they lack that substance and only provide you with glucose or energy, they are considered empty calories. Now, what's the difference between whole versus refined grains? The term whole grain indicates that when the grain is processed, nothing is removed. So when you look at a whole grain kernel, like the one on the screen here, you see there are three parts: the bran, which is fiber-rich, the endosperm, or the starchy part that provides the glucose or energy, and the germ, which is the nutrient-rich core. Whole grains contain all three of these layers. Refined grains, however, do not. When grains are refined, the bran and the germ are removed, so you only get the starch and fewer nutrients. Examples of whole grains include whole grain bread, whole grain pasta, whole grain oats, and brown rice. Notice how I said whole grain in front of a majority of these food products, and that's because that a majority of them that are made from whole grains state they are made of whole grain in the ingredient list. But be very careful, because there are packages such as cereals that say they are made of whole grain in the front part of the package, but they may have less whole grain than they appear to have and are often with added sugar. This is why it's important to look over the ingredient list when looking at nutrition facts labels. Examples of refined grains include white rice, white pasta, and noodles. So how can we tell? Let's take a look at this cereal, for example, Cocoa Rocks. It says in front of the package that it contains a good source of fiber and is made of whole grain. But when you look over the nutrition facts label in the back of the cereal, you notice that it does contain 3 grams of fiber for every serving. But is it made of whole grain? Recall that when we discussed the nutrition facts label in Lesson 2, we talked about how ingredients are listed in descending order by weight, meaning the first ingredients of the list is what makes up the bulk of the product. When we look at the package, at this specific package, corn flour blend is the first ingredient. Notice that although it is made of whole grains, it also contains degerminated corn flour. With what we learned in the previous slide, this means that it lacks that nutrient-rich core. That germ was removed. So although it provides you with some fiber containing whole grain, it's not completely whole. Also, when evaluating cereals, looking for products with less sugar is a good idea. So keep this in mind. In comparison, if you look at a box of Yummy-O's, Yummy-O's contain 7 grams of fiber, and the first ingredient listed is whole grain oats. When comparing two labels, be mindful of the amount in each serving. So Yummy-O's serving size is 60 grams, while Cocoa Rocks in the previous slide is 29 grams. So technically, when comparing about 60 grams of one cereal to the other, they have about the same amount of fiber, as Cocoa Rocks has 3 grams of fiber for every 29 grams, and if we double that, it's 6 grams of fiber for every 58 grams of Cocoa Rocks. Now, let's compare the sugar content though. At the same weight, the sugar content in Yummy-O's has half the amount of sugar versus Cocoa Rocks. Therefore, Yummy-O's are more nutrient dense. A practical tip to keep in mind when comparing cereals, although it may seem a little bit confusing comparing fiber content and looking at the ingredient list, a practical tip to keep in mind is that 4 grams of sugar equals 1 teaspoon of sugar. So if you want to visually see what that looks like, you can now by just doing a little bit of math when looking at nutrition facts labels.